Coming up next on the Whiskey Flick Shopping Network, we've got some incredible collectibles headed your way. First up, we've got an amazing baseball signed by none other than Babe Ruth. Oh, Scotty, the baseball.
Well, we were playing behind the studio to test it out and lost it over the fence.
You took a baseball that we were selling that was signed by Babe Ruth and you actually played with it?
You keep telling me that, but who is she?
The Sultan of SWAT, the King of Crash, the Colossus of Clout, Babe Ruth, the Great Bambino.
Oh my God, you mean that's the same guy?
You're killing me, Smalls.
On today's Whiskey Flick, heroes get remembered, but legends never die. Grab a glass and your glove. It's time to play ball at the Sandlot. Welcome back to Whiskey Flick. I am your host, Terence Dunn, ready to dive into today's awesome flick with some great whiskey. I'm very excited to be joined by a special guest who's on to help us close out our month on the baseball diamond, a hilarious friend of the show, and just a general all-around awesome dude, Mark Marshall. Mark, welcome officially to Whiskey Flick. We're so excited to have you.
Thank you so much, Terence. This is awesome. I'm a big fan, and I'm just super glad to be here. The minute you brought it up, I'm like, I gotta get on this show. So yeah, let's get it on, man.
Hell yeah. Well, we're super excited to have you. I know we've been trying to have you on here for a little bit. You were one of the first people that Matt and I thought of when we were thinking about who we wanted to have on the show. So I'm stoked that we were able to get you on for an awesome movie. Now, Mark, for people who are listening to the show and maybe don't know you, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I studied film at the great institution of UC Santa Barbara. Yeah, I studied film in maybe a parallel universe out there. Hopefully, I'm a director, and I have several Oscars under my belt. Didn't work out, so now I moonlight as a humble government official, but by night, I'm an amateur stand-up comedian. Just a lover of talking and really diving into films.
Well, awesome. I love the shout out to Santa Barbara. It's one of my favorite places. You shout out amateur stand-up comedian. I have seen your stand-up, sir, and it is certainly beyond amateur. You are quite a funny dude on the stage and off, so got to give some love there.
Thank you. You know what? It's you gotta be quick. It's just one of those things where you just dive right in, and it got me to kind of combine a lot of, I was an actor, did some school plays, a lot of minor stuff, but there is nothing like stand-up. It is just an incredible, and I have to keep plugging stand-up, because I will probably make stand-up references during this. Yeah, thank you very much. Hopefully I'm funny.
Stand-up seems like something that is both awesome and terrifying, at least from my perspective. It's just something that seems really cool, and like, fuck that, there's no way I could do that.
The fear is the thrill. Absolutely.
So it's like skydiving, bungee jumping, roller coasters, all that other kind of stuff. The butterflies is what gets you going.
Oh, yeah. First stand-up quote, Jerry Seinfeld, most people are afraid of public speaking. That means over death. So that means they would rather be in the casket than giving the eulogy. That was like, wow.
Well, awesome. Well, Mark, before we really get into it, obviously with this being your first appearance on Whiskey Flick, it's become kind of a rite of passage for folks. We're really interested to know, because we always want listeners to kind of understand the tastes of the people that they're going to hear from on the show for the first time. So give us the rundown. What would you say are your all-time top 5 favorite movies?
I thought long and hard about this. Of course, this film, Sandlot, is going to be in my top 5. Number 1, without a doubt, I watch every year on my birthday, is Gladiator. I love the epic. And I'm also a history major, so that was huge. I mean, of course, they took a lot of historical license, but Roman Empire has always been fascinating to me. But running down the list, Gladiator, Shawshank Redemption, phenomenal film. Glory, Glory is Civil War. One of the, I just say, best acted movies of all time, I think. Cast is insane.
Actually, all three of those movies that you've shouted at, well, The Sandlot, maybe not so much because the kids are all unknowns, but the other three are like ridiculous cast.
Yeah, and then of course number 4, I have to throw in Return of the Jedi.
Okay.
There's two kinds of people in the world. There's Empire Strikes Back people and Return of the Jedi people, and I am one of the latter. So yeah, that would be my top 5.
I like it, and I do like that you have. I mean, because that's a controversial pick, Return of the Jedi in your top 5. So it seems like acting then is really big for you when it comes to movies. It seems like casts and strong performances are kind of a big draw for you then.
The acting, of course, the cinematography and, the music, how sound engineers and composers, they really create a story where you can place the scene with the music. So they're really telling the story through the music as much as through the visuals. But for me, it's really the emotional attachment. I quoted Gladiator at my wedding.
That's awesome.
Are you not entertained?
So some context on that, like at what point in the wedding did you quote Gladiator?
So it was actually the welcome speech, after our first dance. I would also tell you, the first dance, the give, the take, the stepping on toes, the restructuring, the bargaining. That is a great metaphor for a marriage. Erica, unfortunately, gives me the mic first, and it was my time to shine. And I said, are you not entertained? Is this not why you are here? Crowd erupts. For the most part, I was silent. But I got my plug in.
Oh, man, well, that's good. Well, thanks again for giving us the rundown on your top 5. Before we get into today's movie and start getting into the details, we got to talk about what we're sipping on today. It is Whiskey Flick. So obviously, before we get into the flick, let's talk about the whiskey. So Mark is our guest. What are you sipping on this week?
I am sipping on Cutty Sark blended Scotch whiskey.
How do you take it? Straight? Do you do on the rocks?
You know what? Usually I'll do it neat, but I added a little bit of ice because, hydration. What are you sipping on?
Little Knob Creek 9-year with a very small amount of ginger ale.
Babe Ruth raised his arm and pointed to the center field bleachers. No one believed it, because nobody had ever done it before. But the Babe was calling his shot. On the next pitch, the great Bambino hit a towering 400-foot home run. And even although he'd been a hero before that, that's pretty much how he became a legend. 30 years later, a kid named Benjamin Franklin Rodriguez became a neighborhood legend. It was in the greatest summer of my life when he taught me how to play baseball, and he became my best friend.
We're wrapping up the month of April in our celebration of the return of baseball with one of my and your all-time favorite baseball movies growing up and today, which is 1993's The Sandlot. On last week's show, we did get a chance between Matt, Nate, and myself to draft our top 5 all-time baseball favorites. And obviously The Sandlot was pretty high up there for me. I actually drafted it second on the list. Now, Mark, you weren't with us last week to be able to participate in the draft, but we do got to know, what are your top 5 all-time baseball movies specifically?
There's The Rookie, Field of Dreams. Of course you got it. Sandlot, 42, great movie. But it's like, heavy. And you'll notice the trend, all kid-related, Angels in the Outfield. Danny Glover, really acting outside of his role as a disgruntled authority figure,
He's still too old for this shit.
When were you young for this shit, bro? Do we have any recordings of Danny Glover? I'm pretty sure he was put in a lab. Just too old for this shit. Yeah, that would be that's what I'm coming in at.
Nice. I like it. I like your style. Definitely like kid-centric baseball movies. I don't know. There's something like burned into your brain about them as just being kind of like associated with your childhood and all the things this movie that we're going to talk about does really well with nostalgia and warm kind of rose-colored feels.
Yeah, from Field of Dreams to like The Sandlot to 42, it's like, I think the biggest thing is they all have a little bit more to do than just baseball. I'm going to come clean, Terence. You can always get me to play a sport way more than you can get me to watch it. Baseball, as far as the game goes, I love the game. Kind of like the 30 for 30s, atmosphere behind the sport, that always intrigues me. I think it's translated onto film.
I would agree for sure. Well, let's dive into some specifics then around this particular whiskey flick and start unpacking this cornerstone of our collective childhoods. Let's talk about a few fast facts for this week's whiskey flick. So The Sandlot was released in April 1993. It was released at the time by 20th Century Fox, which means it's now owned by Disney. Weirdly enough, that kind of works because it's constructed a lot like a Disney movie where you've got some interesting parental relationships. The kids are kind of like latchkey running off doing stuff on their own. A lot of Disney vibes for a non-Disney movie. The movie was incredibly popular. It only cost $7 million to make, again, mostly because the cast was unknown. It made $34 million in theaters. However, much like most kids' movies, it saw the majority of its growth, especially in the 90s, on home video. The current estimates say that it made around $76 million in VHS and DVD sales in the 90s and early 2000s. A few other kind of interesting facts about the movie. The filmmakers were actually sued for defamation by a former classmate of the writer-director of the film, David Mickey Evans. His name was very similar to the name of the Squints character. For obvious reasons, if you've seen the movie, Squints is a kind of a creep, particularly in the latter half of the movie. Actually, two scenes he's kind of a creep, both of them involving Wendy Peppercorn. We'll get to it. So I could see why he'd be interested kind of dismissing that, and it does kind of speak to the semi-autobiographical nature of the film. The movie actually had mixed reviews on release. Specifically, the biggest criticism that seemed to be levied its way from a negative standpoint was some people thought it was a little too nostalgia for nostalgia's sake. And then, of course, let's talk about the people. So a few crew members to shout out. Again, we already shouted out David Mickey Evans, who was the co-writer, the director, the uncredited narrator of the film as well. It's loosely based on his childhood, and the dude is mostly known for doing a ton of kids movies. Shortly after The Sandlot, he did the film First Kid. He directed a few Beethoven sequels. He did the Ace Ventura Jr. movie. He also did, of course, the Sandlot sequels. So he's very kind of tightly associated with this franchise. The only other one that I thought was noteworthy to shout out from a crew perspective was Anthony Richmond, who was the cinematographer. I love the look of the film, the way that it's classically cinematically shot. It's got this very nice look to the sort of vintage nostalgia of it. I also thought it was incredibly fascinating that he has this one kids film on his resume in the middle of a slew of horror movies. Right before this, he did the original Candyman. Right after this, he did Tales from the Hood. Most of his resume is horror movies, so it was really noteworthy that just The Sandlot was dropped in the middle of. No shade to those movies. I fucking love Candyman. I love Tales from the Hood. Last but not least, we got to talk a little bit about the cast, and I actually broke this down into two groups. Normally, we just kind of talk about the cast as a whole, but it feels a little disingenuous given that the supporting cast is so well known and the kids were all unknown. So from the kids' perspective, we had Tom Geary, who played Scotty Smalls. This was his first role, and he's actually done a ton of stuff. Both as a child actor, he was in Lassie, and then as an adult, he was in Black Hawk Down, Mystic River, U571. He seems to do a lot of TV procedural dramas. He's got a bunch of CSIs and Law and Orders under his credits. We had Mike Vitar, played Benny the Jet. This was one of his earlier roles. He did a bunch of Disney movies after, including the last two Mighty Ducks movies. Probably the most still recognizable, because he still very much looks the same in a lot of ways, is Patrick Renna, who played Ham. This was his first film. He also did a bunch of Disney stuff after this. He did The Big Green. He did Recess. He does a lot of smaller roles even still to this day. He's super active on social media. And then the last one we shouted out was Chauncey Leopardy, who played Squints, who also was in a ton of stuff. Father of the Bride, Casper. He also was in The Big Green with Patrick Renna. And then he was on the show Freaks and Geeks, which I haven't watched in years. Now I want to go back and watch it because I don't remember who he played on Freaks and Geeks. Now let's talk about the big name, the supporting cast. So first of all, you got Karen Allen, who plays Scotty's mom, Mrs. Smalls, and you know her from so many 80s things. She was in Animal House. She was in Raiders of the Lost Ark. She was in Scrooge. I mean, very, very well known prior to this movie coming out. You have Dennis Leary, who played Bill, who's Scotty Smalls' stepdad. This was kind of the start of the crest of the wave for him, because right after he did this movie, all of his really big stand-up specials came out. He had a bunch of supporting roles in the 90s. He was in Demolition Man. He was in The Ref. And then obviously now he's probably most known, if not for his stand-up, then for his time creating. He starred in, and I think he also directed Rescue Me, or several episodes of Rescue Me. James Earl Jones, who played Mr. Myrtle. I mean, come on, we all know who James Earl Jones is. He was most known at this point as the voice of Darth Vader. So we definitely all know James Earl Jones. Apparently, by the way, the kids thought it was the coolest thing when he was on set, because they're like, holy shit, it's Darth Vader. And obviously he's done a lot of baseball movies. He was also very prominently in the film Field of Dreams. And then last but not least, we got to shout out Art LaFleur, who portrayed the Babe. He's done a ton of sports movies. He was in also Field of Dreams, Mr. Baseball, The Replacements. So before we get into our impressions and dive into our personal details around the film, Mark, any thoughts on the crew, the cast, or anything else kind of around the structure of the film?
As far as the cast goes, Vitar, Benny the Jet Rodriguez. I mean, if there was a kiddo I was ever jealous of, quits acting after he's, becomes the crush of every young female in America in 1993 and grows up to become a Los Angeles County firefighter. I'm like, that is just gasoline. I'm like, he must be stopped. It is really funny, yeah, that these kids are so supported by such a incredibly decorated cast. It is very nostalgic and it's very rosy, but there's a reason it's in my top 5. I don't think there's a slouch in this film. What a great slice of American cinema.
I agree. And I love that you called out the nostalgia factor related to the cast, because I think that's one of the reasons why it works, is because these kids are all unknown and they're so natural and they're so good. Because there's some kids movies that when you go back and watch them, they don't really hold up because the kids are kind of hamming it up, or, you could tell it's like, well, it's a kids movie, so they're not really, what are kids really going to say about it? But I mean, the kids carry the movie. These are leading performances from these kids, and they're fucking good.
How do I catch it? Just stand there and stick your glove out in the air. I'll take care of it.
About time, Benny. My claws are going out of style. They already are, Squints. Shut up.
Talk a little bit about your experience with the movie, right? What were some of your initial impressions, things like that?
Growing up on the mean streets of La Mirada, for people who don't know it, it's a great town. Every town says all American. My initial impression watching The Sandlot, which I watched probably 3 times in theaters because I was just rabid for this movie as a young kid, was basically, wow, somebody made a movie about my friends. This is awesome. Hilarious, extremely quotable. Watching it again, I realized a couple of things. The 90s was also the rise of the kid movie. Second stand-up reference, like John Mulaney said, I was around when kids started becoming important. 70s, 80s, there's kid supporting characters, but kid-centric movies, it was all the 90s, and it was a phenomenal time to grow up. What I really, really love about this movie is that it celebrates boyhood in a way that very few, there's kids movies, but this celebrates boyhood in a different way than a lot of other movies. I'd say maybe, you have The Goonies, you have Hook. Yeah, it was watching me and my friends play baseball and getting in trouble. And his mom said, skin your knees. And also the kind of, social capital that Benny had to bring in Scott's character and say, hey, let him play. The 90s was all about, you look at films like The Mighty Ducks and just we're eclectic and we're weird and that's cool and being yourself is great. And then here comes the opposing team who are kind of weirdly Aryan, and we don't like that. We don't like the same. We like different. Growing up in La Mirada was a phenomenal childhood. I got to play with a lot of neighborhood kids. We went to school together. We grew up together. This was not just a kids movie, not just a celebration of, I'd say, boyhood, but it was also a celebration of just suburban summer. It just crossed so many sections for me.
The film is set in the San Fernando Valley. So I'll even take it a step further and say one of the things that I identified with was not only that sort of suburban summer, it does have this very Southern California suburbs feel to it. There's the one kind of vignette where it's so hot and they're what is it? Ham's talking about the drinks do nothing. It's Southern California in July and we're sweating and it's hot and we're still out on the ball field having a good time. I 100% identify with that. I watched the hell out of this movie. I don't know how many times I saw it in theaters, but I definitely know that I owned it on home video. I remember I had this in one of those little plastic clamshells, and we would just play the hell out of this VHS tape watching this movie. I also loved it and wanted to kind of echo your point around, the way that the characters kind of shifted here a little bit, because we did have the early birth of this version of kids movies in the mid 80s. Movies started to get a little more kid centric with, the Goonies and stuff like that, which you shouted out. But I think that was really just the beginning of it. I think it's fascinating that once you get to movies like The Sandlot and The Mighty Ducks, especially the fact that these are really sports centric movies, I love that you do have these these lead characters that are very good at what they do, right? They're very skilled, they're very popular, but also they like make it a point to be inclusive. Like they want everybody to play. The team is made up of different people from different backgrounds with different experiences. And I think that that's a really cool thing to showcase, right? Because I'm sure most of us have had that experience of not being welcomed into a group or not being picked first to play on the baseball team and all of that kind of stuff. And so it's a little idealistic, but at the same time, that's an archetype that at least as a kid, I really appreciated. I think the only other thing I'll shout out, I always was really intrigued by, and even still on a rewatch, the relationship between Scotty and his stepdad, Bill. Obviously, Scotty lost his father, who passed away right prior to the events of the film. I grew up as a child of divorce, and so I in a lot of ways related to that experience of, you know, a young kid getting to know kind of someone who hasn't been there your whole life and trying to navigate that. No matter how good it is, it's always a challenging relationship because there's just a lot of interesting things that happen within that dynamic. And so the family dynamics speak to me.
All of the adult interactions are kind of legendary, like, and they have that line, you know, heroes get remembered, but legends never die. All of the adult interactions outside of, well, the one person who loves you the most, your mom, inaccessible, like, you know, you have Wendy Peppercorn, inaccessible, like Bill, kind of this like aloof, inaccessible character, like that epicness, that legendariness of it's wonder, but it's also like unknown apprehension. It just captured that. Like, how do I talk to my stepdad? How do I talk to this beautiful girl? As great as legends can be, legends in our head are built up way more.
Because the movie obviously is like dripping with nostalgia. Like the whole thing is just, I mean, between the music and the look, these references to Babe Ruth and all these kind of like iconic players of the game, the whole thing is just couched in almost an aggressive amount of nostalgia. But I like the fact that, to your point, the film is constructed almost like a legend or a tall tale, or like the way you envision life moments being remembered, right? So like on the one hand, it encapsulates all these life moments that like most of us can relate to or have personally experienced. But I love the way that it plays with the way we remember things. Like we always want to remember things in a very positive and like very uplifting way, but also we remember things in pieces. When you watch this movie, you know that it takes place across a summer, but there's no real sense of time throughout the whole thing. Like, was this yesterday? Was this 2 weeks ago? We don't really know. And that it's kind of funny that that's the way how memory works, right? You don't necessarily remember exactly when these things took place, and you don't necessarily remember every single moment with your mom or with your stepdad or with your friends, but you remember those cornerstones, right? Those legendary moments, those big, larger than life things. And I like the way that they made that the structure of the film in like a really subtle way. I thought that was kind of cool.
Isn't that, you know, the essence of being a kid, is that you have no other frame of reference. This is as awesome as life is going to get. Yeah, you can remember like the good, the bad, and the ugly. I will never live this down, or this is the greatest moment of my life. There's kind of no in between, and I love that.
There's this really, it's almost the opposite of what we talked about with Bull Durham, whereas there is this noteworthy lack of the mundane. Like there's nothing in this movie that is like pedestrian or boring. Like every event is significant or memorable in some way. Even if it's not like a major plot point of the film, it feels like the kind of thing that would have been a big memory in a kid's life. There's none of the like, you know, we're walking to the, you know, to the school bus for the final day of school, or, you know, we're shuffling off to go shag baseballs in the outfield. Like all the boring stuff is gone, and everything that's left is the things that you would remember 10, 20, 30 years down the road. I think the best example of that in the context of the film is that carnival scene, which is hilarious, right? They cram all the chewing tobacco in, and they're chewing it, and they get on the big spinning wheel ride, and they throw up all over the place. You get tequila playing in the soundtrack. Like it's fucking hilarious, right? And it's a great scene in and of itself.
I was saving it for a good time.
What is it?
Big Chief. The best.
Sheesh, Smalls. I suppose you don't even know who the babe is either. It's Plug. What? Chewing tobacco?
Backy, man.
What do you do with it? You're killing me, Smalls.
But when you think about it in the context of the film, it's sort of like, how did we end up here? Like, how did we get from the previous scene to now they're just like hanging out at a carnival? And the reason why is because that was the next significant event. We're just kids being kids. And the next big thing we remember is being a bunch of dumbasses and stuffing our face with chewing tobacco and barfing all over poor carnival goers. It's making you relive childhood memories in this really fascinating way.
Like that endless summer as a kid. You have no job. You're not waiting for the next paycheck. No responsibility. School's out. Yeah, a great summer like seemed like forever. And the way that the film captures that, there's not even a mention of like, yeah, I remember it was a Monday and like.
The only thing that really pins any kind of time frame to it is the 4th of July, because that's the one night game they play all year. And it's perfectly sandwiched in the middle of the movie, right? I think it's almost dead center in the runtime of the movie, which would make it the dead center of summer. That endless summer, you get that like slow down, that's like stretched timeline throughout it. And then all of a sudden it's compressed as people grow up and they leave the Sandlot, right? Like you get this really quick epilogue of so-and-so went here and then so-and-so went here and they're like disappearing from the baseball field. It's nostalgic. It's kind of sad. Like people grow up and go in different directions. But the way that it spends 90 to 95% of its runtime on this endless summer, and then all of a sudden fast forward and it's, 15 years in the future and you've got Benny the Jet with the steal home for the Dodgers. It's this very interesting sense of time that just made me think of, I don't know, just how I remember stuff. I can never remember the exact time. Sometimes I can't even remember the exact place or date, but you remember the things.
It is so rare, that boyhood is celebrated because it's always boys transitioning into men. Looking back now, I'm just like, wow, dude, they had like those fireworks are definitely legal. Like,
in LA for sure.
Yeah, we're just gonna walk into this random stranger's house, after we knock down his fence. I'm like, ah! It was just that risk-taking boy nature. It was unapologetic, and I love that.
And yeah, you're right. The movie does kind of revel in its boyhood. I think the only kids in the movie that really get growth arcs or like growing up arcs would be Scotty and Benny. They're really the only ones who evolve their characters in any sense, and they're still very much kids, but they're also the only ones that we see as adults by the end of the movie too. But I think they're the only ones that really get any kind of growing up arc to their story. The growth in the relationship between Scotty and Bill on the one hand for him, and then for Benny, the way that he steps up to the plate after his dream with Babe Ruth's ghost.
I hate as it's coming out of my mouth to say it, but it's just like, it's not about the end, it's about the journey. That is not the whiskey. That is me choking on my own sink. Benny the Jet became this amazing, professional player, and Scotty became an amazing commentator. It's not that we don't care. It's just like, it was about everything that came before.
In fact, the fact that Benny became a professional baseball player is almost like a given or like pedestrian in the whole process. Like, of course he became a professional baseball player. Like, the kid was good from the jump. Scotty becoming a commentator, I think that's maybe part of his growth journey, because like the dude didn't even know who Babe Ruth was.
Yeah.
And then obviously by the end of the movie, he's become like full circle into embracing baseball and everything about baseball. Other than those that we've kind of already talked about, are there any other big scenes or anything else about the film that really is, I don't know, memorable to you or important or stands out?
For people who don't know and can't see my face, I look like the guy who pitches the heater. I'll just leave it at that. It's the Valley. It's supposed to be kind of set in California. I did live in the Valley for a little bit. Watching it now and not as a kid, it was just like, this must be some incredible post-racial 1950s. Because even when I was doing the rewatch and thinking about the Sandlot, I'm like, did James Earl Jones ever mention like the Negro Leagues? Like, and he never does it.
No, he talks about his time with the Babe. That's it.
You knew Babe Ruth?
George? I sure did. And he knew me. He was almost as great a hitter as I was. I would have broken his record too, but...
You went blind.
Yep. I used to crowd the plate so the strike zone almost disappeared. Pitchers hate that. That's the way I played. 100% all the time. Baseball was life. And I was good at it. Real good.
That, and I mean, definitely, was not integrated, and you don't know that as a kid. I'm just thinking about it. I'm like, oh my God, 1950s Southern California, and like this kid is in the pool. He's in the pool. Not to get too like political or social about it, but I had a very ethnic community that I grew up with, and it was awesome. And looking back now with the lens of an adult, you're like, was like we kind of glaze over some things there. You know what? But I would not change a thing about this movie, because the beautiful thing about sports is just like, if you're good, you can play. And that's all it was. It wasn't like this kid is that, you see it in Mighty Ducks, you see it in Little Giants. We don't want the kids who all look alike and are all the same and who are just naturally gifted. We want the kids who are going to try, especially for me growing up, being one of the few like black kids in my neighborhood. Just so impactful that he was just a character, just another kid. And that's another layer of what I love about this movie and the Americana. If we're going to launch something into space about like aliens, we want you to know who America is. Sandlot's got to be there.
It is a distinctly American movie, I think, in a lot of ways. Like, I know you already shouted out the Ray Charles song, but it is a very American childhood experience kind of movie. I think you hit on some really interesting points about, and full disclosure, like we've, I think, had this conversation now a few times on this podcast about movies from this era, right? And so we always like to couch the sort of the way that we think about the history of race in this country, right? From a 2022 lens versus a 1993 lens versus a 1962 lens when the movie came out. For whatever this movie does questionably from a historical accuracy perspective, I think it does right by its actual time of release. Like, in other words, that may have not been what things were like or what we would have even envisioned them to be like in 1962, but in our idyllic view of the mid-90s, that was what we would hope things would be like. That would have been a thing in 62, but not necessarily 30 years later in 92. Obviously, call out the year 1992 in Los Angeles. That's going to evoke all kinds of things. Was
there anything going on?
Yeah, was there anything happening in history that year? There's certainly some interesting things to contemplate within that. And I mean, it's a kid's movie, right? Like, it's not going to necessarily get into all of those pieces, but I do think that there is a contemporary idealism that maybe feeds into it that makes me okay with the historical revisionism, I guess.
As you were speaking on this, just like Babe Ruth, huge figure, like the iconic line, heroes get remembered, legends never die. You don't want to think about your heroes not embracing everybody equally. Like in the movie, it's just like, oh, he knew me and I knew him, it's just like, yeah, and we're going to leave it at that.
Yeah.
We want Babe Ruth to remain legendary. Like Bridgerton on Netflix, as far as a reference goes, for like kind of this post-racial, like Victorian era. It's interesting to think about when even now where we have to definitely be sensitive and cognizant of how different people through history have been marginalized or, talked down to, and kind of adjust our tone in that aspect. It's also nice to think about, where would we have been if that wasn't the case? Like you said, we wouldn't have wanted this to be a problem in 1993, so why make it a problem in the movie? Yeah, obviously we grew up with it. It was a rise. The 90s, I don't think can ever be duplicated as far as kids go. Come on, man. Just Super Soakers alone.
Sure.
The overall push of the 90s was, hey, what's really cool? Being yourself, number one. And also, hey, include everybody. And I think that's an awesome thing. So would not change the Sandlot at all.
This is going to sound kind of cheesy. I don't mean it to, but like, it's almost like this, you got to start somewhere kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so, and especially for a kid's movie, like, do I wish they had done a better job of incorporating like stories about the Negro Leagues? I mean, like fucking Jackie Robinson is a picture on his wall at the end of the movie. And yet they don't really spend any time talking about fucking Jackie Robinson, who was an incredible baseball player.
You take Hank Aaron. I'm like, yo.
All of that's, I mean, literally, it's 62. Maury Wills, like, there's just so many opportunities to have these different conversations. To your point of showing this neighborhood that's integrated, where everybody can have the opportunity to play the game, where skill trumps all, right? Like this idea that, it doesn't really matter. Like, put on your hat and grab your bat and glove and let's all come together and go play at the Sandlot. Like, kind of a utopic concept.
Our lead character is Latino, the supreme, like, Aryan kids who come up, roll with the baseball diamond. He says verbatim, like, except for Rodriguez, you're all a disgrace to the game. It was about you. That's a choice that they didn't have to make either. he's incredibly inclusive and wants people to succeed and enjoy the sport. I'm just going to get emotional here. That Ray Charles version of America the Beautiful, it always hits me. It always hits me. And I think because of that underlying feeling of being a kid again, and it was just about one thing. Can you play? Yeah, it's great. I do have to hijack and ask you a question, though. if we're along the line of social, what are we thinking about? You play ball with a girl.
So I have some interesting thoughts on this, and I struggle with a lot of this stuff, like as I revisit some of these movies, right? And it's not even just like a 2022 like socio-political whatever. Like we're all just older and wiser, right? Like you make your way through life and you learn things. I think that you could couch a lot of those comments under childhood ignorance, right?
Yeah.
Like when I think about that line, right? And obviously having rewatched the movie a bunch of times, you played ball like a girl was like the ultimate insult. I mean, is it on its face problematic? Yes. Am I kind of writing it off a little bit as like boys will be boys? A little bit. I don't think it gives them a pass, but at the same time, like I think about, I never personally uttered that phrase, but I think about it's an accurate representation of what kids would say. I think that's ultimately where I land on it. It's not great. I hope kids today would stop fucking saying it because it's immature.
We'll take you on right here, right now. Come on. Yeah. Right now. We plan a real diamond, Porter. You ain't good enough to lick the dirt off our cleats. Watch it, jerk. Shut up, idiot. Moron. Scab eater. Butt sniffer. Pus licker. Fart smeller. You eat dog crap for breakfast, geek. You mix your weenies with your mama's toe jam. Yeah! You bob for apples in the toilet, and you like it. You play ball like a girl.
Pee drinking crap face, unfazed, bro. Unfazed. You play ball like a girl, and they cut to like the one guy, like, yo, that was uncalled for, man. Like,
it's even framed in the film as a mic drop moment. You play ball like a girl. And everybody's like, whoa, like that's like the absolute worst thing you could have possibly said. Kids today, they are probably saying that on baseball fields, again, because they don't know any better. That doesn't make it okay. I would hope that nowadays there's more girls playing on the Sandlot, but at the end of the day, it felt very accurate to my childhood experiences.
And mine as well. And I'd be lying if I said like those insults were not thrown by myself and by other people. Just to echo everything you said, and I think you really just nailed it, is that really these kids they're kids. And along with that celebration of boyhood is also the ignorance of boyhood, which makes for some hilarious situations, but also some cringe. Like why did you say that? Well, like, because I'm stupid. Like, like, because there's no redemption to that line in the movie. There's no girl who comes back and like just smokes them all. There's like zero redemption. And just like all them also swearing off the chewing tobacco. Man, we were dumb. So you take that line out of its context of, man, these kids are dumb, just like you said. I think you're going to have an unauthentic film.
It's definitely like they almost need to like fail forward, right? We can kind of infer it. The film never gets us there. I'll also argue when we talk about it, it never gets us there with the problematic Squints Wendy Peppercorn relationship.
They got 9 kids. Obviously, he thinks highly of women. So. The 90s was not just kids' movies, but kids' programming of let's be inclusive. You have the Planeteers, and you have the Power Rangers, and you have the Recess, and you have the Magic School Bus. And it's just like, this is what we want to see. But I can tell you, growing up in even a very, multi-ethnic community, like I definitely faced racism and definitely faced struggles. But I just look at this film, it's really a celebration of, I guess, the American ideal, the suburban, just adventurous childhood.
I mean, let's be honest. We've talked a ton now about how this movie deals in memory and how this movie deals in nostalgia. Is memory ever not utopic?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, there's obviously going to be big, bad things that are going to stand out to you as you look back from a historical perspective. But for the most part, I think we all have a tendency to look at the past with rose-colored glasses. We all want to remember the people that we grew up with as being awesome, and our parents were amazing, and our childhood was special. And like, we want to have all of these really positive recollections of the past. Are they accurate? Fuck no. Again, like, what delusions are you experiencing? But again, I'm just so fascinated with the role of memory in this movie. You're kind of remembering the best version of it or the best parts of it. And I think that that's intentional. Are there any other kind of big scenes, big lines, anything else you really wanted to call out?
A little something for the audience. I had 10 years in animal control. Don't ever jump into somebody's backyard. I don't care if you have PF flyers on. Please don't do that. Also, too, so the Beast. Oh, I'm going to throw a little shade. Yes, the cops are still afraid of dogs. They were back then. They were now. They were in my time. And they always will. Shout out to law enforcement. Not a hater, but you know who you are. This is a very personal anecdote. Actually, the Beast, as far as the breed goes, is like an English Mastiff. And they're actually probably some of the worst guard dogs. They're incredibly sweet. Usually, my friend Howard adopted one. Her name's Madison. She's about 215 pounds. And she is, like a kitten could probably knock her over. Just the mythos of being a child, how they use the intentionally crappy, not even animatronics, like puppet, like to make the Beast. It just made it that much better. And the embellishment of the story, and just that is the one thing that translates from boyhood to manhood, the embellishment of stories.
Oh my God, he ate a kid, like the Beast, he was never seen again, like that type of thing. It's very indicative of the MO of this whole movie, of playing with your notions of memory. This crazy monster that lived in his backyard.
But yeah, that's my takeaway. Mastiffs are usually pretty sweet. Don't jump into people's backyards. And yeah, men will always embellish. Size, definitely.
Smalls, you mean to tell me that you went home and swiped a ball that was signed by Babe Ruth, and you brought it out here and actually played with it? Yeah, but I was gonna bring it back. But it was signed by Babe Ruth! Yeah, you keep telling me that. Who is she? What? The Sultan of Swat. The King of Crash. The Colossus of Clout. The Colossus of Clout. Babe Ruth! The Great Bambino! God, you mean that's the same guy? Yes!
The Wendy Peppercorn stuff. So let's talk about it. I think that this might be the only true issue that I have with the movie. And I'm going to break it down, and then I'm going to ask you for what your take is. So first of all, throughout the film, this Wendy Peppercorn character is definitely put up on a pedestal, right? Like the first time you see her, Squint's got googly eyes for her. She's appearing in slow-mo. You can clearly tell that Squints is infatuated with her early on, and then really shortly after we get to the pool sequence. The pool sequence starts off a little creepy, but like kind of harmlessly creepy, right? You've got Ham, who's kind of walking along his way to the pool, and he's kind of saying what's up to like, hey, what's up, ladies, and kind of doing that thing. And it's like, that's creepy, but it's like harmless kid creepy. Like, you're fine. Like, it's just, that's the kind of thing kids do. He thinks he's being suave. Obviously, the biggest thing in that sequence is Squint's grandmaster plan to intentionally drown himself for the chance to receive CPR / make out with this girl he's infatuated with, Wendy Peppercorn. My biggest problem with the scene, I'll just get right to it, so I got to shout it out here, the use of music in that as he kind of initiates the makeout sequence, and we get the drop of This Magic Moment by the Drifters, is one of the best needle drops in a film ever. Like, it's incredibly well executed from a cinematic standpoint.
Come on, man, come on.
Yeah, he looks pretty crappy. Squints! Come on, man! Oh God, he looks like a dead fish. What?
This magic moment.
Little pervert! Oh man, he's a deep shit.
My only beef with this sequence, and I feel like this was even obvious in the 90s when the film came out, that there is a problematic approach to consent here, right? Like, he's tricking her into making out with her. That is inherently problematic. It was problematic in 1993. I think the thing that I struggle with, once I get past that, the thing I still struggle with narratively is the fact that she becomes so quickly okay with it is so problematic to me. He makes out with her and she's, oh my God, you pervert, and she starts slapping him. And the kids all get kicked out of the pool immediately, and no longer than them rounding the corner for Squints to peek back through the chain link fence does he find her kind of smiling back at him like, oh gosh, silly kids. You just fucking got them kicked out of the pool. Like, that doesn't even make narrative sense. It was bad enough for you to like escort them out, but now you think it's kind of cute and cheeky that he did it is fucking weird to me. It feels narratively broken to me. It's my only real beef with this film that I can't get over. So I don't know if you have different thoughts on it.
He kind of turned into like the Fonzie of his group. He's the bad guy. He's the bad boy, you know? He's got the bravado. He's got the juice, as it will. Just being a boy who has had like a crush on so many older girls. The slow-mo booty shot. Like, you are killing me, Smalls. Like, you know, the lotioning, the oiling. I completely understand your perspective of like, maybe if she wasn't, you know, broadcasting it out there, maybe something like that. You know, like it's kind of like this, not anti-feminist, but yeah, cringy, and kind of putting it back on Wendy Peppercorn, which is, I mean, even then it's just like, no. However, that scene is so great to me because it just shows you the lengths. The guy literally could have died.
Of his own institution, to be fair.
Yeah, no, of his own institution. And like, that's not just a boy thing. That's a man thing. It's like, man, boys are dumb. Man, men are dumb. Like, we will do anything. It's lust. It's infatuation. It's not even love. And to speak to the portion of like, all of a sudden she's totally cool with it. It's one of those things. You ever see something where you're just like, man, I would never do that, but I gotta appreciate the balls on this character. Like, I think that was just like the most of like, you know, like the whole movie is about a game and taking risk and being legendary and like conquering the legend. And it's just like, wow, you really went. I think that was the overall message of that film, was just like, not Wendy Peppercorn being fine with it. I was a legend to you and you went for it. You should have been destroyed. But you know what? It's just like, no one can ever take that away from me. And I could either be incredibly angry and embarrassed about this, or I can recognize game. Desperate, almost kill myself game.
Really, what my last question for you is going to be what you think the film is trying to say, or what you think the kind of like big idea of the movie is. So it sounds like you're kind of taking that idea of legends and kind of the legendary nature of these kind of big iconic moments growing up.
I think the overall theme of the film is take a chance. I mean, even from start to finish, the film is consistent about that. Like, you know, his stepdad and his mom took a chance moving out there. He took a chance going back to the field. Benny took a chance on him. The film is incredibly consistent about taking a chance, even if you fail. You know, how many times did they go back to try to get that ball in different ways? I love that, because we all get to chance to do, you know, something great, and even if people aren't going to see it. And like, I love that line. And this film actually, it's in my top 5 because it really shaped the way that I live my life and the way I think. I think if you try to go too legendary, you probably will die. You know, there's a limit. Do not jump into people's backyards. Yeah, take a chance.
The thematic focus of the film has got to be the Babe Ruth quote, right? Like, I mean, like, why else does it exist? It's very, very cornerstone in the film, this idea of heroes get remembered, but legends never die. Like, sort of, why be a hero when you could be a legend? And that does dovetail so well with everything else we talked about related to this film, with nostalgia and how the boys are so obsessed with like the traditions of baseball, and everything about it is just attack that iconic moment. To your point, take chances, right? Because, you know, if you take a chance and you win, you're a legend. And I think that that's something that is pervasive throughout the film, whether you're talking about the Wendy Peppercorn stuff, whether you're talking about the obsession with Babe Ruth, whether you're talking about the fact that Benny the Jet grows up to be a Dodger. Like, everything is about becoming legendary and becoming larger than life throughout the course of life. And so I think all those pieces kind of fit together really nicely with that image of take a shot.
Remember, kid, there's heroes and there's legends. Heroes get remembered, but legends never die. Follow your heart, kid, and you never go wrong.
As we get ready to wrap up our look at The Sandlot, as we always want to do here on Whiskey Flick, we love to have a little bit of fun with the movies. And so the first thing we want to talk about, some of our own Sandlot memories, right? We spent a ton of time talking about how The Sandlot really cashes in a lot on this idea of nostalgia and kind of the rose-colored memories of the past. So I'm curious for you, whether it's one specific moment, either for you personally or maybe like a broader historical era, is there anything that you are particularly nostalgic for?
The s'mores. I mean, also, like I'm in building construction management and I'm just like, who built a tree house that could house 9 boys? That is awesome.
Right?
and like, we're also going to leave like 9 boys unattended with open flame inside. It was a great time to be alive, man.
When the vacuum cleaners explode in the treehouse, I was thinking about like, where the fuck are these kids' parents?
There is just like, dude, the rolling rules there are no rules. I even we'll go out and camp and it's just like, first, you get the graham, then you put the chocolate, then you roast the mala. Like, just learning for a kid, like, how to combine all this deliciousness into one thing and just enjoy it. That sleepover is always going to be in my head. So I would actually love to have a Sandlot themed party.
No, I like that. That'd be fun. And like a camping party too. That'd be dope.
Oh yeah.
So I'll probably go a little bit later. I think I am probably most nostalgic for my college years. I think it's because a lot of my childhood, there was a lot of turbulence and change. Not that I had a bad childhood or a problematic childhood. There was just a lot of, like, I moved a lot as a kid. I mean, obviously my parents got divorced. When I think about college, I think about the fact that I had left a lot of that stuff in the past. I was kind of a fully formed person. And that was really where I made a lot of the like friends and relationships and have a lot of these really positive recollections of times that I would want to revisit without any kind of editorializing. Like, that's a time period in my life that I unequivocally remember as fun, at least in my current state of mind, when I'm the most nostalgic for. And it's funny because, again, I still know all of those people. I still interact with them on a regular basis, but the idea of going back and kind of reliving some of those moments feels like the most tempting to me.
My parents also divorced and when I was in 7th grade, so yeah, God, it is such an awkward time. It is such just a
great timing, guys. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Like, really? Like, even though maybe wasn't always like rose colored, there was a lot of stability in my very early life. And a lot of that stability was playing sports with the neighborhood kids. Like, they made a movie about my friends. This is awesome.
That's awesome. So, Mark, before we wrap up, the last bit we wanted to have some fun with is, in addition to nostalgia, and this kind of actually feeds into nostalgia, is the movie deals a lot in baseball nicknames. All the kids on the team have nicknames, and they talk, I mean, God, they unload like every freaking nickname for Babe Ruth, the Sultan of SWAT, the King of Crash. And so I have a couple of famous player nicknames. Well, some of them are probably more well-known than others, and I'm curious to see if you can guess the player based on their nickname. Are you ready?
Okay, shoot.
So we're going to start with Big Papi.
Big Papi, Ortiz?
Yes, David Ortiz, the Red Sox. Yes, indeed. Woo. So next up, we got Charlie Hustle.
Charlie Hustle. God, no.
Pete Rose, the infamous bag stealer, hence Charlie Hustle.
Oh, okay. No, I would not know. I can't even lie about that. Like, it's the whiskey is keeping me honest, man.
All right, Hammer and Hank.
Oh, yeah, Hank Aaron, come on, yeah.
Yes, Hank Aaron. All right, Mark, so to bring this in for a landing, any final thoughts on the film? And of course, our rating scale, which is from 1 to 99 bottles of whiskey on the wall. So where do you land with this movie, The Sandlot?
I got to give it 95 bottles of whiskey because even as a kid, I was just like, bro, leave poor Wendy Peppercorn alone, man. Like, you are right. I am with you on that one. Other than that, dude, this film just slaps, bro. They knocked it out of the park. I have been waiting to say that. Incredible slice of Americana, suburban life. If there's one film I want the aliens to see, I'm shooting this up. So I'm gonna give it 95.
Nice. I like it. I will land on, because it reminds me so much of my childhood, I'm going to rate it the year of my birth and give it 82 bottles of whiskey on the wall, because it does. It reminds me a lot of my childhood. It's probably if we're being like objective, it's probably a higher rated film than that, but that speaks to me. I was born in 1982. We're going to give it 82 bottles of whiskey for the heavy amounts of nostalgia and the way that this film just constantly reminds me of my childhood. Before we do land on it, we did talk about music a little bit kind of throughout this. Is there any song that to you is like kind of the big standout iconic for you?
It's the instrumentals. They use it at the end title, and they also use it when they're, beating the crap out of those kids. That like kind of really big band. I don't even know the title of this song, but every time I hear it, I thought I would go back and watch it and I'd think, oh, it would be the Tequila or There Goes My Lady or This Magic Moment. But it's that song, even over America the Beautiful.
Well, I will take your close second as my first then. I always write down 2 songs in case somebody steals the one that I had. So I will absolutely shout out that Ray Charles rendition of America the Beautiful. That America the Beautiful is iconic.
A purple mountain majesties over the fruited plain. But now wait a minute. I'm talking about America, sweet America. God done shed his grace on thee. He crowned our good. Yes, he did. Heavy brotherhood from sea shining sea. I wish I had somebody to help me sing this.
He's really kind of not even singing it. He's kind of talking it. It's great in and of itself, but the editing, the cinematography, it wraps it up.
Well, last but not least, Mark, we never have a Whiskey Flick go by where we don't talk about outside of the movie, what's living in our heads rent-free this week. So is there anything living rent-free in your head this week?
Just on the positive spectrum, one of the movies that Sandlot knocked out that is definitely in my top 10, but is now getting the phenomenal sequel that we've been waiting for is Top Gun Maverick. So, I feel the need for speed. Let's do this. That's my positive right now. Yeah. What about you?
Nice. I like it. Well, I'll keep mine short and sweet because obviously since we've been doing pods all about baseball all month, it's 100% occupying my brain power outside of the movie I ranted about last week, which was Everything Everywhere All at Once. So I'll give a shout out to the Dodgers, who are having a really hot start to their season. The Dodgers are starting hot, which makes me very happy because obviously the Dodgers are my team. And that's always just kind of a nice way to start and enjoy the baseball season. So I'm really, really excited about that. Thanks for joining us again for Whiskey Flick. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And if you like what you hear, throw us a review to help others find the show. We'll be back in your feed with more, including your thoughts on The Sandlot. And as we've been asking for the last couple of weeks, your all-time favorite baseball movies. We've actually gotten voicemails from quite a few people already. So thank you for your calls. This week is your last chance to call in and just rant and rave about your all-time favorite baseball movie. Give us a call on the Whiskey Flick hotline, 818-660-6369. You can also hit us up on social media at Whiskey Flick Pod to join polls or share your takes, or you can email us at whiskeyflickpod@gmail.com. Mark, it was a ridiculous pleasure having you on the show. We cannot wait to have you back. For folks who want to keep up with you, or if they want to see kind of more of what's going on with you and what you're doing, is there anything that they should follow or check out?
Yeah, you can follow me at Brodicius. And, I don't post too often. I'm big into Jeeping, getting outdoors. We'll be looking for maybe sophisticated ignorance to start by the end of this year, just talk, as far as couples, just talking about issues and different things, other than that, I'm here for it. Terence, it was an honor, a pleasure. You are a legend.
I don't know about that. The pleasure is all mine for sure. And I can't wait to see. I'm excited for the pod. I look forward to the day that I get that invite to come join y'all, because I'm very excited. And I can't wait to extend another invite to you to have you back on the show. We got to get Erica on the show too.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
We'd be remiss as we're plugging things if we didn't also give a shout out to our friends Tony, Matt, and Nate, who rock the 58 West King and Taco Corp podcast. You can find links to both those shows in our show notes to give them a listen. Thanks again for checking out Whiskey Flick. We'll see you next week for more on The Sandlot. 2 weeks from now, we've got the moms taking over in May as we celebrate Mother's Day. We're actually not going to reveal the name of the movie as we normally do until next week. So make sure you tune in next week to hear more about our special guest and the movie she's chosen. Until then, keep the whiskey flowing and the flicks going, and we'll see you next week.
As long as there is whiskey in the world, As long as there is whiskey, as long as there is whiskey, as long as there is whiskey in the world.
As soon as it came out of my mouth, I was just like, "Oh my god, I'm gonna get roasted!" Like, I was just, yeah, he's gonna be the new chick. I was like, "Oh god, I'm terrible."